In early May 1934, Clyde temporarily moved his base of operations to Gibsland, Louisiana. Not much more than a small logging town even today, Gibsland offered a unique attraction. It was close to the home of his friend, Henry Methylu, who offered his help in finding them a hideout. This trust proved to be Clyde's fatal mistake.
The Methylu's lived in a very poverty type place, 10 miles east of Coshada, an area there between there and Castor. And they live kind of in that swamp, and like rural type people live like sharecroppers. And they did whatever they could do to gain whatever they wanted or needed. The people that I know disliked them very much. They were real crude and rude and felt like the best way to get what they wanted or needed was through violence.
Well, my father went up to Uncle Gus Cole, had a little country store up here where 516 intersects 154. And my father went up there just before dark in the evening. And I don't remember the exact date, it was sometime before they were killed. And there's a man, an old man Henry Methylu from down at Castor, was there, and they asked Daddy if the John Cole house was vacant, and Daddy told him yes. And they were on a, what we called a pole truck back in those days. A lot of people was cutting telephone poles and light poles and peeling them and selling them to try to make a living. And they had a long trailer on an old truck, didn't have a cab on it. And he said that there was a woman sitting on the truck, and a man in overalls, a little bitty fellow, said he had the keenest black eyes he had ever seen, standing backed up against the door with his hands and the gallowses from overalls. And old man Methylu went on inside, and Daddy went on in with him.
Mr. Methylu was sitting on the porch, and he was the one that talked to Otis Cole. And the house had belonged to his father, Uncle John Cole, we called him. And it was, the house had been abandoned for several years. So it had grown up in the woods, and it was just a perfect hideout. You could hardly get in there in a car.
With a new hideout and feeling safe from the searching eyes of the law, Bonnie and Clyde maintain a reasonably high profile, being seen regularly by many of the local residents.
We had seen them on a Sunday afternoon. They came to the little store, and she stayed in the car. He got out and bought gasoline, probably not over 2 or 3 gallons or 5 gallons, because that's all you bought then. It was probably at 25 cents. But anyway, he bought us an orange crush drink. They were a nickel, and gave my cousin and I were up there, and the little old store, and he gave us one. We were probably barefooted and just kind of playing around.
Others remember seeing them at Mrs. Canfield's cafe.
Very nice looking young fella. And I saw Bonnie sitting in the car. And I went back. I was working for a lady, living with her, Miss Myrtle Terry. And I went back to the house there, and I told her, I saw the beautiful white lady. I knew she wasn't a native from here, because usually if a person was born around, she hadn't been in the sun a lot, you know.
We knew Bonnie and Clyde were in the area. We had discussed it before. We said probably it was Bonnie and Clyde. We knew someone was hiding out over there in my uncle's house. And my daddy said that he knew that much from the description, that he had waited on them in the store there, a little country store. And they always, when they stopped at the store, Bonnie went in to buy groceries or the few things they bought, and Clyde stayed in the car. Bonnie came in the store. She did have a noticeable limp. My father had mentioned that to us about how she looked.
Bonnie was small, thin, and what I call a dishwater blonde. I don't know, just not very blonde, but blonde. Kind of nondescript looking. I don't remember anything except the red clothes she wore. That's the most I remember. And he was tall and thin and wore a hat, then straw hat. And I thought it was unusual they were cutting pulpwood, but I never thought about it at that time. He wore dress shirts a lot.
At about this time, Ivan Methvin, Henry's father, contacted the local sheriff, Henderson Jordan, through an intermediary, and he proposed a deal. Henry would set up Bonnie and Clyde to be captured or killed, didn't matter, if Jordan could arrange a pardon for his son in Texas for 2 murders that Henry had committed there. Jordan contacted Frank Hamer immediately because Hamer could cut a deal like that through the Texas governor's office. Finally, arrangements were made and the posse was structured so that Jordan and his deputy, Prentice Oakley, would be in charge because of Louisiana jurisdiction. Hinton and Alcorn were included because they offered additional firepower and because they were the only members of the group who could identify Bonnie and Clyde on sight. Hamer and Galt rounded out the posse with their expertise in firearms, and they brought along the governor's pardon for Methvin. When you think about it, this was the strongest of all possible groupings that could have been put together short of a military squad. It was also, without a doubt, the deadliest force Bonnie and Clyde would ever face.